StepBible.org is a great way to read the Bible and to study it as deep as you like. The mysterious book of Genesis has some great stories about God and his people, as well as insights into how God works that still has everyone puzzled today. The tools of Step Bible can help you look right inside the original text. First, let's make some room by closing the help panel. Now, hover over day and you can immediately see the structure of Genesis 1, as every occurrence of this word is highlighted. The quick definition of the Hebrew word is also seen. We'll come back to what days mean in a bit, but first let's look at the structure. Hover over earth and heaven, and you can see that these are key concepts too. And click on a word, and you get much more information about it. Or you can go to the sidebar and do a word cloud. And now you can see clearly that the most important subject in Genesis 1 is God himself, the Creator. When you animate the word cloud, you can see the people fly by. Find God, and then he makes Adam, and Adam in the garden, and he has children, Cain and Abel, and then they have children, Lamech and Enoch, and then Noah, and of course there's lots about Noah building the ark, and then Noah and the flood, and then eventually you have Noah's children, Ham, Shem, Japheth, and their children, Eber and Haran, and then Abraham. Are you curious about all this who's who? Let's have a look for Adam's family tree. We'll start with a search for Adam. So we remove Genesis 1, so that we're searching the whole Bible, and then we type Adam. Don't worry about all the choices. Remember, choice is power. It's your power to work the way you want. And today we're not looking for Adam Clarke's commentary, nor the Greek or Hebrew word for Adam, though this is very useful. And we're not looking for other names like Adam. We could do a text search for Adam, but let's be lazy. We'll click on topic search for Adam. If we were doing a Bible study on Adam, I'd go to Nave's related subjects. Look at all this detail. But for today, the simple book headings will take us where we want to go. Adam's descendants are in Genesis 5, so we click on that reference and go there. We can now close the subject search. Don't worry, we can always get it back via the bookmarks. And you can use the hover to find your way round. If you hover on Adam, you can quickly see where his entry ends. By the way, you can see that man is highlighted faintly. That's because Adam is related to the Hebrew word for man. Now, as you hover over each son in turn, we go over and we end up with Japheth. But where's the rest of his family? Well, click on his name and you can find all the places where he occurs. There, his generations are in Genesis 10. Now, this chapter isn't laid out as clearly as chapter 5, but again, highlighting helps. Now, which of Noah's sons is the ancestor of Abraham and the Jews? If you hover over each son in turn, you find it's not Japheth, not Ham. It's Shem. He's referred to a lot later on in the chapter. Oh, and notice the faint shading on name, because Shem is Hebrew for name. Now, you probably guessed that he would be the right son, but which of his sons does the line go through? Hover over Elan, Ashur, Arpachshad, however you say that name. So let's keep following the children. Shelah, Eber, and when you hover over Peleg, there's a faint highlight of divided. That's because his name means divided. He was named when the world was divided. So now we're at the time of the Tower of Babel. Did you notice both chapters 5 and 10 started with generations? Let's reopen Genesis 5 from the bookmarks and remind ourselves. Now if you hover over it, they both highlight because they're both the same Hebrew word, Toledah. And if you hover over the verse number, you can see the vocabulary of the verse. And you can see And that's interesting, that a third of all the occurrences of Toledo are in Genesis. So it must be pretty significant, that word in this particular book. So let's find them in Genesis. We click on the number under book, and here they are listed. And you can see that the uses are very significant. If you follow them, you'll find they aren't just the start of family trees, they're the starts of new sections. This word divides up Genesis into separate sections, from the generations of the heavens and the earth to the generations of Jacob, which of course is all about Joseph. So now we're starting to get a handle on this book. Okay, I suppose you want to go and solve the problem of the days in Genesis 1. Are they 24 hours or are they long periods? Are they literal mornings or metaphorical mornings? Well, we aren't going to find a definite answer, but we can find some facts. Hey, if it was so simple, don't you think it would be sorted by now? Still, let's go and see what those facts are. The first day ends in verse 5, so let's look at the vocabulary there. These days, they have evenings, nights, mornings. They all sound like normal time markers. You can click on each of them and see how they're used throughout the Old Testament. And surprisingly, we'll find that even in poetry, they're used in a very literal way. Check it out for yourself, but to save you time, here's the results that I found, all the metaphorical uses that I could see in the whole Old Testament. Now, night is always referred to as the opposite of daytime. There's no nighttime of the soul in the Old Testament. That kind of metaphor comes later. Morning is always the literal dawn of day, except for two references. In Job 38:7, it says, when the morning stars sang together. Now that might mean the angels at the start, i.e. the morning of all time, so metaphorically a long time ago in the start of all time, but probably it doesn't. Probably it refers to the stars that you see just before dawn. They're called the morning stars. And Psalm 90:14, satisfy us in the morning so that we can rejoice all our days. That might mean in the morning of our life, contrasting with all our days, the rest of our life. But probably it's literally dawn, like in verse 5 and 6, which says the grass is refreshed in the dawn, having been parched during the day, and when it's refreshed, then you sort of get new life for the day. So it means refresh us each morning, so we'll be rejoicing each day. Now the word evening is always a literal timestamp. It's set in 1 Kings 10:15, where it's translated correctly, the west. But of course it is literally sunset, because that's the direction of sunset is the west. And so we find everywhere, even in poetry in the Old Testament, these words do all literally refer to sunrises and sunsets. They're time markers. So interpreting these days literally has a lot going for it, because you can't simply say, oh, well, this is poetry in Genesis 1, so it's metaphorical time. That's not the way Old Testament poetry used morning and evening in practice. But it is true that a day isn't always a period from evening to evening. If you click on day, there's a quick summary of the different meanings. And in the vocabulary box, you can see from the totals, there's rather a lot of these to check. So I suggest that we confine ourselves to Genesis and Psalms as a good contrast of ideas. So you click on the book, then add Psalms to the search line, and it makes a search amalgamating those two. Now to save you time, I've looked at them all, and here are all the metaphors in the Psalms. You can type in any set of references in almost any standard form, and Step Bible will cope with it. Now notice these are all about the day of trouble, never the day of happiness. Sad, isn't it? Except for one, Psalm 37:13, the day of the Lord. And of course that concept, the day of the Lord, occurs very often later in the prophets. Now in Genesis, there's only one non-literal day. That's the day on which Adam and Eve eat the fruit, because in Genesis 2:17, on the day you eat of it, you will surely die. And of course, Adam and Eve are thrown out of Eden, and they don't die for a long time. How long did Adam live? we saw that right at the start of this study. So in the bookmarks, go to the bottom and click on there it is, Genesis 5. And there in verse 5, Adam was 930 years old when he died. Presumably that's why we hear in the New Testament, a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord. Can you remember where that is? Let's search the text of the ESV. So if we look for the text 1,000, and perhaps you remember it's in one of the epistles, so let's confine the search to Romans to Jude. And there it is in 2 Peter 3:8. And click on it and we can see it in its context. And yes, it fits. God isn't slow to carry out punishment, as it seems. And certainly it must have seemed like that to Adam, that God was a bit slow. But Peter says, no, God doesn't forget. Even after 1,000 years, he catches up. Anyway, in the end, with regard to the days, there's evidence for every side in this debate. But the point is, we should always rely on evidence and not on our prejudice. And Step Bible helps us to quickly find out the facts for ourselves. Have fun.